Right. So in case you hear I'm a bit stuffed, hope you can hear me well. I have a cold, but I'm hopeful that I'm quite audible. So for today's class, you're going to start with JavaScript. So you're going to start the interesting bits of um, programming or front-end development. And so I'll just go through some theory. So because they're introducing a whole new concept. So bear with me. It will be a bit of theory, a few slides, and then we'll get to do some coding for practice in a few minutes. So let me share my slides and then we can start. Um, okay, so hopefully you can see my screen. Um, then I can just start. So far we've covered HTML and CSS. Each has its depth. We have really touched just the basics, just the bare minimum that we need to create our web page. And I believe that in our last class, to remind ourselves, it was some days back. Um, we ended with a nice CSS. I think I rushed through showing you how to add icons, but um, we really created a very nice web page that had colors, that had some links. So it was quite nice to the eyes. But that is the work of HTML and CSS to guide how the application will look like. So it's appealing to the users. But now the engine behind the application requires some programming. So it's what you were doing before is just markup language. So it was a bit high, low level, like just basic. But you'll get to see the difference as we continue. You'll get to see that HTML is a bit basic compared to JavaScript, right? So with HTML and CSS, we're just making the application look nice and everything, but it is a simple website. Like there's not much interactivity in the sense that the user clicks a button and something happens. So right now, if we were to add a button, it would look like a link. That is the most interactivity that we can do. But if you, of course, if you continue with HTML deep down, you might find workarounds compared to what I'll be teaching you with JavaScript, right? So it doesn't mean that you can't achieve much, but JavaScript is much better in the sense that it's a programming language, meaning you can force your way you can force an application to work the way you want it to work, right? So in this case, when it comes to JavaScript, you now make your application much more interactive in that in case you want to open some text, it's hidden, and then when someone clicks save, it opens another page, and like it makes things much more interesting, right? Um, so if you remember my first class, I was explaining the difference between the site for Shop Zetu. Let me just open it so that you can see the difference. I think it was this one. Well, I should not open Raha first. I probably should open something else. And let's say, is it this? Um, yeah, no, it wasn't this. Give me a second. Oh, this is a bit more interactive than I even thought. Anyway, so as that page loads, you see with Shop Zetu, if you click on the links, we can achieve all this using HTML and CSS. But this part where when you click add to cart and then our shopping cart is updated in a way. So let's say I just want to buy this. All this is still HTML, but JavaScript comes to at this point when I click add to cart and then my cart, it pops up, and I can even add more whatever, what is it, like I look more clothes. So you can see at this point here, I've bought 3 items, and if you look at my subtotal, it has come to 13,000. So every time I add it, it updates. Okay, so that is the difference between just working with HTML and JavaScript. Okay, so if I proceed and click checkout, it's more interactive in that sense. I can add a note and then it will be on my order. All right, but if I think I should just, let me, if I can clear my okay, hope they can do some recovery. Anyway, I'm trying to just explain how the interactiveness I'm talking about. The images that you can see are quite nice, like how we have structured the images in, there are 4 at the top, 4 in each row, and then there's some text. All this is HTML and CSS. But with JavaScript, it comes with, when you add to cart, when you're able to track your order like that, that is where JavaScript can come in. It's really hard to achieve that using just normal HTML, right? Now, I think this page is loaded. If you remember this page, it really doesn't have much, um, much interactivity, as I've just talked about. We're able to just see the text. We can click links if you want. That is HTML. You can add images, you can change the font and all the rest, right? So it means that if you want to make your application more useful to the user, oh sorry, no, that one, you get to use JavaScript for that. So with that knowledge in mind, what exactly is JavaScript? It's a powerful programming language, right, that adds interactivity to the website. So that's the guy who invented it some 20 years ago, I believe. And it's versatile and beginner friendly, honestly. Of course, with every new thing that you're learning, it looks hard, but comparatively to like other programming languages, JavaScript is quite easy. I believe JavaScript and Python are the best programming languages to start your coding journey. So with more experience, you even able to create games, to do apps, what else, like shopping lists and all these other basic applications. Or you can create comprehensive database driven applications. So I believe there's a group that is doing backend programming, and they are able to, I think they're focusing more on the application side of things, but our side, we are focusing on the user interactivity. So with JavaScript, it can enable us to even connect to the backend side. So actually, that's how it works. So we have HTML and CSS, and then JavaScript can even help us to retrieve data from our database or from our backend part of our application. So if you continue with your journey in programming, you'll get to know that um, other other applications, or how you structure your team. We'll have the front end guys, which is you. We have the back end guys who will be creating the data that will be displayed in your application. And then you, as a front end person, will use JavaScript to show that data on your screen. So the good example is when you're adding to cart and you're able to update the value of the clothes you're buying. So that is that way when you save it, it's on the database. And anyway, that's a whole rabbit hole. I won't focus on that too much. Right. So in itself, it's compact and but still flexible, in that there's some parts of JavaScript setup that you don't really need to go through. It's just there, you leave it as it is. And because over the time, I've mentioned it was invented like over 20 years ago. So with all these developers who exist in the world, they've written several tools. We call them libraries or plugins. Probably you've had them somewhere, and they help us to achieve some of the basic tasks that you want to do. So you don't really have to recreate it. Okay. So you'll be able to unlock a vast amount of functionality with minimum effort. So all you need to do, we call it import. That's a concept I'll introduce later. Okay, so we can use APIs, and I'd like to talk about it for a second. So browser APIs or third-party APIs. But what exactly is an API? It's just two applications talking to each other, or two computers talking to each other. Just the way we normally talk, like through our phones and in person, or just as we're doing it on a Teams call. Computers also need to communicate to each other. And later on, you'll get to understand the architecture of an application, the it's not the coding part, but like where you'll host your application in a server, and then how every other user can access that application. So with APIs, they help us to communicate. So you're able to, for example, I was talking about the front end and the back end team. So the backend team will be creating an application using a different programming language, probably Python, or there's another JavaScript called Node Express.js, or Laravel PHP. That's another programming language. But for that data to talk to our front end, we use an API. Okay, so I hope by the time you're done with React, I'll have shown you exactly how the APIs will work. Okay, but let's just cross our fingers. We'll have enough time to go all the way to API. But that the idea is one part of your application talks to another part of the application. A good example was Google Fonts. Remember when we were adding fonts to our HTML or CSS, we used a link, and that is a good example of an API. We did not have to download and import all the fonts in the world. We just needed to link our website to the Google fonts. So we just leave it there. Whoever is adding fonts, we trust that they'll always have it live and running, and then we communicate. But that is the idea behind API, just two applications talking to each other, two computers or servers talking to each other in one way or another. Okay. So back to JavaScript. Providing functional APIs are built into web browsers to provide functionality such as creating HTML, setting CSS, collecting a video stream from somewhere else, and then so for example, how we are doing it right now, generating 3D graphics, audio samples, getting data, and so many other ways. Third-party APIs allows developers to incorporate functionality insights from other content providers. So this is the best case for Google Fonts. If someone else did that, they provided that content for fonts, all we need to do is pull it ourselves. Okay? And then browser is when we are the ones manipulating it. And you'll notice that we'll use a lot of third-party APIs when you're creating an application. A lot, like 50%. You don't have to reinvent everything because they already exist. Okay, so still on JavaScript, they are written in the programs, or the code is written in scripts. So hence the script part. So there's an HTML tag called script that we'll use to put our JavaScript code. So we'll put it directly in our HTML. So it works similar to CSS, where we could have it as its own document, or we could put it as part of the HTML document or in line. I hope you can remember that. So probably we'll use a combination of its own document, like JavaScript document, or we could have it within the HTML document. So we just use it interchangeably and you get to see the difference. So scripts are provided and executed as plain text, and they don't need any special preparation or compilation to run, like unlike some other programming languages. This statement means the reason I'm saying JavaScript is easier to learn is because you don't need to compile it you don't need like a whole setup on your computer compared to Java. Java on its own is a very heavy programming language, but I'm not saying it's hard to learn, but I would say JavaScript is easier to learn compared to Java. There are other programming languages as well. So with JavaScript, you just need to write the script. The browser will know how to interpret it. Okay. Now, so these are just basically some of the capabilities and why we do it. We have we can change the existing content, modify styles, maybe like you hide some content and then when the user does something, you show it. React to user actions such as mouse clicks, pointer movements, key presses. Probably you've seen this in your internet when you're just working online somewhere. You might have seen some of these activities. So you're able to send requests over the network to other servers. So that's where I was talking about the APIs. Get and set cookies so that to understand user behavior. They scroll up to some part of the page and then they stop, and why. And then remember data. So data comes from like the backend part, but we can also JavaScript can also store some bits of data on the client side. So client is similar to frontend. Okay. Now I'd like to ask you guys some question. Or maybe let me get to hear, where have you heard of JavaScript before? Maybe you've seen it somewhere.
For me, I've used it a bit.
Okay. As JavaScript itself or as a framework?
As a framework also with Vue.js, but not React.
Okay. Okay. Faith, any interaction with JavaScript before?
Yeah, I've also used it before.
Right. At how?
Um, I used it when making a website before, but I didn't use it as much, just kidogo on some
Oh,
parts of the website. Yeah.
all right. All right. That's okay. So Nigel has mentioned Vue.js. Maybe I could ask, which other frameworks do you know of JavaScript?
The ones that I actively use, or the
No,
ones that
just
I've
total. Actually, start with the ones you actively use, and then
okay. So I've never had a bit of luck with React. It's been always something I've been avoiding, but I've used Vue, and then I think Vue, but I've also touched a bit of Node, but that was once when we were looking at another full stack application.
okay,
Yeah.
right. And any all that you know of, don't have to have used it, like
Oh, all
familiar.
of them that I know of.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's Angular, JS.
Mm-hmm.
There is I don't know if Express counts.
Yes.
Okay. There's one called Solid JS. I don't know if but it's a newer one.
Mm, uh-huh.
And Vanilla. Vanilla JS as well.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Oh,
So
and jQuery.
yes, jQuery. So yeah, those are actually the main. Those are the main frameworks that. Sorry, I should probably. Yeah, those are the main frameworks that we could be familiar with. Now, of course, you mentioned jQuery. It was it's it's still relevant. It's relevant, not that it's because it was one of the first frameworks that were created for JavaScript, and then other developers built up on top of it. Now we have React, Angular, and Vue.js, and those ones are for front end. So I also mentioned that JavaScript can work as a backend language, but that is where we use now some other frameworks like Node.js and well, Node is a runtime environment. The actual framework that works together with Node is Express.js, but that is now for backend. So probably the team looking at backend, probably they might interact with it. But in our case, we'll be focusing on React. So it's a good thing. At least I have one person who's worked with Vue.js before, so the learning curve may not be so steep. But you'll notice that Faith, you'll notice that it's not so hard in okay, initially it might look hard, but once you get used to once you start recognizing the code, it becomes much easier. Okay. So honestly, front end is much easier compared to back end. If I was told gun to my head and choose a side, I'll choose front end. But backend is where the action is. Like it's very when you want to create solutions and algorithms and very nice ideas. Basically, in backend, you are the one who is guiding the engine. But with front end, it's more user friendly colors and being a creative in another way. So yeah, with that in mind, I hope I've laid a good foundation on JavaScript, where we are, why we use it, and what is the direction we'll go. So we can start interacting with the with the code, and we'll start with syntax. Now, JavaScript, as I mentioned, can be placed inside a HTML document or on its own in we'll call it a .js file. If you remember with CSS, we are putting all the styles in a .css document. So it's the same thing with JavaScript, where we'll put some code, or we can decide to put all the code in a JavaScript document, or we can put it within the HTML document. So as I mentioned, we put it in scripts, and we use HTML has a script tag. So this is where you put anything written in JavaScript. So you can place the script tags anywhere. Of course, it's recommended to put it in the head section of the HTML document when you want to have it, so that at least your 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 page, your code looks nice. It's easier to track where each code section is. So this is a good example of just a simple JS script. So we have the first section where we have the script, type, text, JavaScript, and then document.write hello world. That is now a basic JavaScript code. Okay. So I'll talk about document in a few, but this is how you can easily just write a simple hello world text or hi there text on a web page. I want to skip this section for a bit. I introduce something else, and then we can now jump to Java, VS Code. So this is a good example of how we will have it in our web page. So we have the HTML tags, the head section, and the body section. Now, the body section, of course, the head section, I have already talked about it. This is just a simple way of how we can write the text. But the body section, specifically the second paragraph, you'll notice that we are using the ID. Remember when you were introducing CSS, we used ID or class, and that concept will still apply in JavaScript. ID or class, okay? So when we want the change to happen in a particular element, only one element, we use an ID. But if it's for several elements, we use the class. Okay, so hopefully you'll remember that idea. So paragraph, the second paragraph, if you notice inside the tags, in between the tags, there's nothing, it's empty. Because we can decide to manipulate this paragraph, because we have given it that ID demo. So in here we can write some interesting code that you can use for just to display some text. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a paragraph. It can be a button. It can be a link. It can be just any HTML element. Okay, so how we able to write our JavaScript, we have the ID, we have the script section, we put all our JavaScript code in here, and then it will be executed with our within our element using the ID or the class. Okay, so we can move to VS Code. Just create a new, just for now we can create just one file, and then later on we can have its own JS document. So on VS Code. So this is our yeah, I was supposed to share some of this. I totally forgot. Sorry. Close all this. Mm, I don't need any of this for now. Right. So, within our this within our folder, our T4S front end folder, I want to create a new file, and we can call it we're going to delete it later. Just let's use a test.html. So later on, of course, we will change and or anyway, we'll see. Just create a new file. You can name it however you'd like, or later on we can rename it to suit. But you just want to create a simple text. And this time round, I won't share. Sorry, I won't share the code. I'd like you to just try and type it first, just to remember to remind your fingers how coding works. So whatever is on my screen, I'd like you to type it yourself. Practice comes with typing. Then later on, I'll be sharing. Okay, so this is the sorry. This is the code that I'd like you to work on. First of all, it's wrong. We're going to fix it, but I want us to see what will happen initially. So just type that. Remember to put the script tags inside the head section, and then just some simple text in the body section. Right, so once you're done, run it on your browser, and you can see its effect. Right, so so that's how it looks like. The text "Hello World" appears at the top. Then you have my first web page and then my first paragraph. Now you'll notice that the second paragraph doesn't have anything at the moment, right? Now, this how this works is with with whenever you write some code in a script, it will always appear at the top. Sorry, at the top here. Okay. But if you link it using ID or class, that's when it will appear inside each element. So in this case, we need to always link up um, our our HTML elements to the code that you want to write. And on that note, I want to introduce some other new concept called document object model, and that will explain whatever line number 5 is doing. Okay, so bear with me. We still have just a little bit of theory just to go through, just to lay the foundation, and then we can continue with our code. So I hope you're with me. I've not left anyone behind. Just let me know if you're still, you can chat if you're still uh, working on the code. Okay, all right. So with JavaScript. So Nigel had mentioned vanilla JavaScript. So there's an actual framework called vanilla JavaScript, but how we refer to plain JavaScript is vanilla. Vanilla is usually like plain. So vanilla JavaScript, just normal JavaScript, how we write it, we use DOM a lot. So DOM is document object model. That is how it's able to work with that interactivity. Now, DOM is a HTML concept, but it helps us work together with JavaScript, a scripting language. So, what exactly is it? So, DOM, the data representation of objects that comprise the structure and content on a web page. Okay. Now, um, objects can be anything like the paragraph you've just seen, a table, which is something we might do later. We'll do it as long as you continue with front end. We have links, all these. When you think about HTML elements, those are the objects I'm talking about. But they become an object because we are trying to manipulate them using JavaScript. So data representation of those objects that comprise the structure and content of a document on the web, our web page. We have our very simple web page where we have just three objects in this case, three HTML elements. We have um, this text, it's floating because we've not assigned it to any HTML element. We have our heading, and then we have one paragraph. The second paragraph is a bit hidden because it doesn't have any text. Okay. So DOM basically represents the page, some second line, represents the page so that the programs can change the document structure, the style, and the content. So remember with, for example, with content, when you I was trying to explain the cat, Is it hidden? You can see my cat. But anyway, you remember when you're trying to see the value changes. That is the content being changed. Okay. The structure would come, for example, when you want a pop-up to appear when an action is done. Like when you click on a button, we bring out some pop-up. All these things, that's how the document object model works. A web page basically can be displayed either in the browser window or as the HTML source. I'll show you that later on. And in both cases, it's just the same document, but the DOM representation allows it to be manipulated. So for us to change any HTML, this concept of DOM allows us to do that. Okay, so when you introduce scripting languages like JavaScript or any other front-end language, it can help us to manipulate the text that you are seeing. Okay, so initially, if you remember with HTML and CSS is just changing the color, the styles, the font, the whatever, but it's not replacing the text, it's not replacing the image. Okay, so for us to replace all these things, this concept of DOM allows us to do that. So it's an HTML concept, not a JavaScript concept. But you'll notice that it uses most of the time with JavaScript. Okay, so you'll see this what we've just typed document right now on VS Code. Okay, so document is the object that represents the document itself. It represents the element that you want to achieve. Now there are so many objects that will come. So think of it, if we have a HTML element, we'll have the DOM representation of it. So for example, I was talking about button, you'll have a DOM button that is attached to it. We have a table, DOM that is attached to it, like that. So the second line, table object that implements HTML table element DOM interface for accessing HTML tables. So if I need to manipulate that HTML element, there exists a DOM version of it. Let me use version here. There's a DOM version of that HTML element. So it's mostly used with like it's easier to see when you get to tables, when you get to especially like data tables, when you get to different pages like tabs within just the same page and so on. Okay, so DOM is built using multiple APIs that work together. And so when it comes to JavaScript, we are able to use it together. So we can write DOM using JavaScript to access the HTML, or rather the web page and its elements. Okay, so it's not really a programming languages, but it just helps us to access it. There's some code initially. Did I skip it? Is it here? I don't think I included it, but yeah, anyway, this can help us. This statement document, we are referring to the entire web page where we want this text hello world to appear, right? And that is how it appears as a first line. So it's just this, when you talk about document, is this web page with the HTML section. Okay, so remember how you're writing HTML, the syntax, the code is different from JavaScript code. Okay, that's why we're putting JavaScript code inside the script tag. But for these two languages to understand each other, we need to always refer to it. So this white space, my page, my document. Okay, how I'll refer to it in JavaScript is document dot something. Right, now that's what this line does. So document, and then the action is write or display hello word. So write is a keyword that it's like print or display or type. Okay, anyway, we were in DOM in JavaScript. So DOM is not really a programming language, but it helps us to access those elements, okay? And without it, JavaScript might not really work and allow us to access our HTML elements. So the document as a whole, we have the head, the tables within the document, the table headers, the texts, and all these things. They are parts of the document object model for that document. I don't know if I'm repeating myself, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. Okay, so we have HTML code, we have HTML tags. Let me go to my VS Code. Right. So let's use this example. We have, this is our whatever we want, these are our elements that we want to display on the browser. We have our heading, we have our paragraphs. But for us to access each one of them inside the script section, that is what DOM allows us to do. So there's this link, then I can close this tab. Let me also put it on the chat so later on you can go through it. Well, oh, there you go. Examples, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. No, no. Yes, another, I was trying to look for the list of all DOM objects that you can use, right? So we have form, we have table, we have the document itself on its own. I understand the ones I'm talking about. And this is with APIs. Yeah, anyway, I'll leave you to go through that. It's a bit advanced. Unfortunately, with Mozilla, their guides are really detailed. So you may get lost initially, but it's a very good resource. Like if you're just working on front-end development, it's good to just be working on this, be referring to this site. Now, initially, it might sound quite complicated because they have not really simplified the text, but it explains. If you're able to capture, just get something from it, it will help you a lot. But remember, we are using DOM when you're working with plain JavaScript, no vanilla JavaScript. When you get to React, we might put a pin on DOM for a second, although most of the times it's good to understand because sometimes the feature might not exist in React, so just need to implement it using plain JavaScript. Okay, so let's move back to our. Just give me a second, just 1 second. I want to stop sharing for a second and then I'll put it back. Just 1 second there. Mm, in the meantime, you can take a break. Just want to fix something for a second, and then we can resume our class. Something needs my attention. Um, let me share again. We can resume class if you're taking a break. So we have 1 hour. So yeah, I believe we should be able to work on the remaining parts with that. So so this is where we are. Now I've introduced DOM. DOM is the concept or the idea that helps us to access HTML elements inside our JavaScript. Okay? DOM helps us to access HTML elements inside JavaScript. Now, there are different ways of accessing it. Initially, as you can see, we were using document.write hello world there. Okay, so that's where we just want to write on the document anywhere in the web page. But on line number 11, we have a paragraph that we want to start working with. Okay. So here I want us to work with this. So we want to, maybe we can, let's just comment this. So how can we access the paragraph tag? There is a keyword called get element by. Okay, so when I said we can access the elements uniquely using an ID or a class, we use the keyword get element by. So it, as you can see on the pop-ups there, we have the by ID, by class name, by name on itself. So that's when something I did introduce really on HTML. You can give each HTML element a name or an ID, but name is not really unique compared to ID. You also have by tag name NS, by root node, by selection, by animations. But the ones we are talking about is this element by. That's whatever we want to access. So we'll be using get element by ID, and then we have our element, our ID is demo, and then we give it some text like hello world. Okay. So here it's just good practice. Now with this, you are able to access. Let me just confirm if I've written the right. Oh, inner HTML. Yes, I forgot something. Dot inner HTML. Yes. So with this, we are able to access our element document. That's the DOM thing we're talking about. Okay. Element by, we're able to access it either by name or by ID or by class. By name is a concept that I think as you continue with Frontend, you'll get to notice that you can give each element a name. So for example, here I can say name equals to first paragraph, like that. But it's not used that much. It was really important a while back before we started using frameworks. But you'll still see it appearing most of the time. Anyway, you can access it using the name or an ID or the class name. Okay, for class is when you want to give the effects to several elements at a go. Okay, so that's the second part of our code. The last part is inner HTML. What exactly are we getting? It's the text that you want to display. That is inner HTML, where my cursor is on line number 12. Okay, so inside the tags, inside the inner HTML, we want to display the text hello world, right? So if you go back, so something has happened. What did I do? It's sensitive. Okay, like there's something I have missed. Let me just see on Mozilla. Okay, this is going ahead. No, let me get it from W3 schools. Okay, see this. Okay, it looks like what I'm trying to show is not working on my side. It's quite interesting. It to be something I've missed. Okay, let's try. Okay, this is something I was just to introduce in a second. Let's try. I do it this way. Man. Such knowledge. Mm. Sorry, guys. I'm going round in circles here. Um, Anyone who can see where I'm going wrong? No? Okay. Let me try this way. Then some issues. Got interesting. But this is wrong. This is actually wrong. What I'm doing here. Anyway, so that has refused. Okay. Anyway, so that we don't take too long with this, I'll check why it's not working later on. Let me just comment it out and skip that part for ID.
Aren't you supposed to like um may I
Yes. Yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
asking
Yeah.
the if you want to if you are like in the previous before you deleted it you wanted to get the element ID by the para uh by the parameter, right?
Yeah.
Aren't you supposed to have declared that parameter inside some maybe paragraph or something like ID is equals to para, like
Yes.
para,
So
and
I've
then
done that. So
yeah,
like this, yeah.
yeah.
So, okay, let's see. Probably I was rushing. Um, yeah, it's still not coming through. It says this is the error.
Mm.
So this I'll still check to see why it's blocking that. There's something off somewhere.
Oh, and
I
the
think yes.
maybe we can the sequencing of or maybe like the script tag maybe to come after the HTML has been read by the
Probably. So let me do this.
yeah maybe the script tag, yeah.
Ah yes, the order. Thanks. Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you. Yeah.
So,
So yes, I have remembered why. Thank you for that. Now
okay.
let me put it back. So how we use script in head is when you're linking, when you created another JS file, okay, that we're importing before we load the web pages. But since we have, so it's good to put it like after body. Yes, doesn't show. Yeah, there. So we need to access the elements first for it to be loaded before we manipulate it. Thank you. I was wondering why I was blanking that point there. Okay. Um, so yeah, I think we can continue. I've spent an extra 10 minutes trying to solve something. Okay, so with this in mind, I hope as I was trying to solve my own mistake here, you got to understand the syntax. Basically, we access our document, we refer it with either the ID, the name, or the class, and then whatever action you need to do. So in this case, we're changing we want to display some text. Okay, so basically that's how we'll be accessing our HTML elements. And to reiterate, have the elements first and then the script. Okay, so when there are places. No, there are two ways of using script. We can create its own JS file, or we can use it inside HTML. Now, if you use in JS or HTML, we need to let the browser load the elements first, and then we can manipulate it. So that's where I was going wrong initially. In as much as I said, you put the text, we import it in head. In this case, just import script tags after the HTML elements, just to be on the safe side. Okay, so I want to move to the next part, and that is we have I have two concepts, actually three concepts that I want to introduce. The first one is variables. Now, variables are containers that store values that you want to display. If you'll see that might have seen what I was trying to access to solve my error using a variable. But basically, they are containers They are they can hold any type of data, but you're able to refer to that data using variables. Okay. Now variables differ in different programming languages, but they cut across all languages. It doesn't matter whether using PHP, Java, or whatever. A variable is something that you'll always come across because it's what the data that you want to display will hold. Okay, so you start by declaring the variable and then assigning it some value. So we always, for us to use, for us, there are two types actually. There are two types of variables. We have constants and we have a constant and a variable. Okay, we call them data containers. We have variables and we have constants. Now variables, these allow us to change values over and over, okay? So once you declare it, you can give it a value, but then you can change it later on, okay? As you can see on my third line. So we have my variable, we give it some value, but then we can change that value to something else like Steve. Okay, so variable is something that will contain your data. We can use it to display it. We can change it over and over. Now there's another one called constants. Constants, they work the same way as variables in that they store data, but it's hard to change them. They're called immutable. They don't change value as long as you're accessing it within the same script. Okay, so we'll look at it later on, but in this case, let me go back to my code. Initially, as you can see, my line number 13, I have assigned my paragraph some text. So instead of doing this, I could have done let. So let is a keyword used by JavaScript to identify that this is a variable. Okay, so let text equals to hi, right? And so with this variable, instead of putting hi at this point, I'll just replace and place it here. So we have created a variable called text. We have placed some sentence called hi, and then we access that variable anywhere within our code. So in this case, I want to display text inside the paragraph, right? Okay, so you can see initially it was a small hi, I can close this. It was a small hi. Now it's a capital hi. It means it has updated, right? So variables, will be using them a lot. I prefer using variables initially because it's easier to understand. But later on, when now you're talking about when your application becomes more complicated, there'll be a space for constants. Remember, constants are the ones that you can't change. So something like a password that you don't want to change over and over. So it's actually quite useful with APIs when you don't want to change the text that is coming. Okay, so we use constant, but I'll leave it for now. Let's use variables at this point. It's easier to understand, easier to track and see what is going on. They are a bit flexible. Yeah. Right. So I hope you can try this. Try this in your side and see what will happen. So just create a simple variable, line number 12, let text equals to, then you can put any text, not height, can be some simple line like, hi there, my name is, like that. And then remember to replace on line number 13 to change instead of that text, the whatever we had, which was high, we change it to the variable. Okay, so I hope you're able to do that. I want to introduce a second concept that you can want to try out as well. We have two concepts remaining. So first was a variable. Variable, remember, is a data container. Okay, it will hold, or basically it will hold some value, either it's a text or something else. Okay. Now, our next concept that I want to talk about are data types. Okay, so data types are they're the different representations of data that we are going to display. And maybe I can get to hear from you guys the different data types that you know of.
We have strings.
Integers.
Strings. Uh-huh.
Integers.
Boolean.
Integers, Boolean, another.
Symbol.
What? Symbol.
Yeah.
Okay, symbol. You can put a pin on that. Major. Float. Bravin. Array. Okay, array. Okay. Another. I put a pin on array as well.
Undefined.
Undefined. Yes, that is a good one. Any other?
Object.
An object. Okay. Last one. Let me hear another last one. Right. Okay. So when it comes to JavaScript, I think most, even other languages, they are categorized into 4 major data types. Okay. So the first one is strings. The second one is integers. Oh, actually, the 5. It's the 5. Integers or float. The second one, we have strings, we have integers, we have float. So float is any integer with a decimal. Okay, and then we have objects like array, JSON, like this is something I will talk about tomorrow. But that's a sequence of data sequence. Okay, so it's not really a string or a number, but it's just several data that has been put together. And then the last one now is that undefined. Wait, actually 6, sorry, because I've missed Boolean. Boolean is also another, it's a true or false value. So data types, basically, they're different values, they're different types of, don't use data types. They're the different representations of data that you're going to display on your application. So on my slides here, These are the difference that we are talking about. So we don't have the undefined listed, but it's a good one. I totally forgot about that. And thank you. So the first one is string. We have string, a sequence of text, right? Usually put in quotes. Any data type that will have to put in quotes will be interpreted as a string. Now, Faith had mentioned symbols. Symbols qualify as a string. Okay, they have their own way of being represented, but we always put them in a string. It's hard not to. We can't put a symbol. When that, of course, when it comes to programming, when he need to put that symbol within or how it's represented within some quotes. Okay, so we have a string, a sequence of text that is enclosed within double or single quotes. So if you start with a single quote, you end with a single quote. Start with a double quote, end with a double quote. Okay. The next is number. So now with number, that's where we have either a float or an integer. In this case, my variable is assigned 10. 10 is an integer. Now there's another, there's a concept called, just bear with me, type inference. And this is where the programming language will understand which data type you are talking about. Okay, type inference. Maybe later you can go look into it. As just put it on the chat, then you can you can refer to that later. So it helps the programming language will understand that this is a number and not an integer. So this is an integer and not a float. Okay. So when you see the example on number, let my variable equals to 10. It understands that this is an integer. But if you put 10.0, it will interpret it as a float. Okay, so it will understand what needs to be done. Now remember, when there's a difference between when you need to use an integer and when you need to use a float. A float is when we have some divisions happening, and it's usually accurate to like about 15 decimal places. But with integers, it will round up or down unless you specify it. Mostly it rounds down. Okay. So numbers are usually a bit tricky to work with, because if you don't specify, if you don't put 10.0, it will interpret it as a number. Okay. Another data type is Boolean. That's a true or false value. There are several exercises that you can work with to understand how this works, but it usually works when later on we introduce functions tomorrow. Okay, so when there's something that is happening and it checks if the value makes sense, we return it either as true or a false. Okay, so with Boolean, I'll come back to it again tomorrow when we're working with functions, because that's usually the best place to display the difference. Same with arrays. Array is basically like other a sequence of data that you need to store multiple values in one place. Okay, so it's a data structure, but we can refer to it as a variable. Okay, so it allows you to store multiple values in a single reference. You need to access many values at a go. Okay, so for example, if I want to describe each student here, I can get their name, their age, their current occupation, their current address. So those are 4 different data sets that we want to refer to one student. We can store that in an array. Okay, so tomorrow I'll still introduce data structures and functions as well. Objects, I don't think we'll go far into objects, but it's good that you understand it right now. Then as you continue learning JavaScript, you can keep referring to it. And also we have talked about document object model and mentioned objects here and there. So objects basically can be stored in a variable, but um, they're a bit tricky to work with. So for example, I can refer to another function or another, if I'm using another JS file within my current JS file, and there's an object that we need to work with, that's where it comes in. So hopefully I might get time to introduce objects like class and functions. I'll see how much time we'll have tomorrow so that you get to understand the part for objects. But it's a good concept to understand because we'll keep using it a lot. Yeah, I'm sure we'll go through it even by the time we get to React because there's a lot of objects there. Right. So in this case, the first two are usually quite the easiest to work with. Boolean is also not so hard to work with. Array is one of the most common variables that you'll be working with, especially when you'll be pulling data from the backend. You'll be working with arrays a lot. So I'll take some time to focus on data structures, specifically arrays tomorrow, and functions as well. That way you're able to understand how these two will work. But for now, we have worked with a string, okay? So the good example was, hi, my name is Anne. So this is basically a string, right? We have already touched on it. Now, another, let's let's use num because I don't know if number is a, oh yeah, I can use number. Let number equals to 10, as we had seen before. Okay. So the one thing I want us to do now is just add a new paragraph. Equals to, let's say, num. Sorry. Okay, and then just place this code down here so that you can. So you can try that, whatever I'm doing. I've created a new paragraph. ID equals to num. I've created a new variable number and I want to display it. I want you to do the same. So my ID is num and I want to display my number. Okay. So type those 3 lines. So that's line number 10 on my screen. We create the paragraph. Then line number 15 and 16 to display the variable on our web page. Just a second. Right. So once you're done, just refresh your browser to see if you can get the number. Okay, so what we've done, we've really touched a lot on strings and numbers. Okay, so we can add different symbols, texts. There are different. Like another thing I might have not talked about in strings are, and that is important to understand, are white spaces. So, for example, you might want to put a new line, sorry, within your text or a tab, or usually new line and a tab. Those are the most common uh, white spaces. You can add them. So something we can do, for example, here. Go check. How are you? No, sort of interrupt. Okay, I look for that. But yeah, there are other. We can add symbols. We can add white spaces. We can add new lines. We can add tabs if you need to into our text. I think it's yes. If not, then I'll check. Yes, I'll check the correct. Sort that around. Makes me losing it. The last idea I want us to touch on are operators. Okay, so once we do this, we'll have a good foundation for tomorrow's class. Operators are back to mathematics. Mathematics symbols that produce a result based on two values or variables. Okay, we did a lot of about 12 years of schooling, and we always had maths involved. So I believe we are all familiar with the normal operators that we know: plus, minus, division, and multiplication. Okay, so those are the operators I'm talking about. Now let me increase the so that you're able to see. Give me a second. Um, right. So these are the operations that we need to work with. No. I don't know what's happening. I'm off my game. Okay. So we have addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Those are the common ones, and they work exactly how we think they work. So we have addition, it's a plus sign, and a simple 6 plus 9, we get the value 15. Or we can also combine strings together. So it's for it does the when it remember what I was talking about inference, type inference on how the programming language interprets the whatever you're typing. Okay, so for example, when you put a plus sign between two numbers or either two integers or floats or float or double, either works, it will do an addition operation. But if you put plus sign between two strings, it will combine them together. We call them concatenate. Okay? It will put them together and it will be displayed as one sentence, right? So it will understand what needs to be done depending on the different data types. However, when it comes to subtraction, multiplication, and division, it only works with integers or floats. So basically works with numbers and we do exactly what I expect them to do in basic mathematics, right? Now with subtraction, it's a forward slash. With multiplication, it's an asterisk. So I want us to try and do that now. So go back to your code and just create another. We can use the same line number 10, don't need to create another paragraph. So just before the document, the last document that get element by ID, on my screen it's line number 18. So above it, let us do some simple operation. So we say, I can say addition equals to 10 plus 14, just as a random number, right? And then you can replace number elements with that to see how it works. Okay, now we'll notice on my screen the value changes to 24, that is 10 plus 14. Okay, another one, we can use a variable plus a number. So here, instead of 10, I'll use the variable number, which we had initially assigned it the value 10. And it will still work the same way. So when you save your work and then you refresh, nothing will really change because the values are still 10 and 14. Okay. So same thing, you can, if we put it this way, let number 2 equals to 15, and then we have number 2 there. So my addition will still remain the same. Nothing will change much, but you'll notice that I'm now using variables. I'm not using actual numbers. Okay. Now, I had talked about when it's an integer, it will do the addition operation. If it's a string, it will put the sentences together. So let's try that on line number 15. So let's text 2 equals to, then is this text that I wanted to add. So let's delete it from here. Okay, so I have changed line number 15, 16, 17. Okay, so you have text 1 is that, text 2 is that, and then I have combined them together. So I'm not adding, I'm combining. So it will understand the difference between when it's a number, it does addition. When it's a text, it does combination or concatenate. Okay, so let me put the keyword there. Right now, I have not refreshed my my text yet, but if I do, you'll notice it has changed because between the full stop and the capital H, there's no space. Okay, that's how maybe you can tell that I have updated it. Right, so it has done the combination, concatenation of text. But if it was a multiplication or an addition, it will refuse. Right, so it becomes like a none, like something is off there. Right. So with that in mind, I have introduced some 3 major concepts: variables, operators, and data types. Okay. So data types, something we'll use over and over and over. Variables, we'll use them over and over and over as long as you're coding. Actually, it doesn't matter if it's JavaScript, Python, Java, whatever. These 3 concepts will always exist: variables, operators, data types. Okay, so hopefully you are going to remember that. Now, let me get to hear your thoughts on my code inside the script tag between line number 14 and 23, the script section. I have done a lot of poor coding. Can someone point out? There's some, or maybe you can point out some concept that I might not have mentioned that I have applied in this section here. Any concept that you can recognize. Let me hear your thoughts. Is there a concept you don't understand, like what did I do that doesn't have not mentioned? There Three actually. There are three concepts I've not introduced, but I have applied on my code. So let me see which one you'll point out. You can chat or type. Faith, I've just seen your message now. Do we recognize comments? Anyone who wants to talk about comments? Yes, Nigel?
Oh, you asked if I recognize comments.
Yes.
Yeah, I've recognized comments.
Okay. Want to add some thoughts about it?
What I know of comments, the single line comment, I've seen you've used it with the two slashes.
Okay.
I don't know if you've used multi-line comment yet, but okay, we have not used it yet.
All right. So there's that concept of comments. Comments help us to understand our code without without changing the actual code itself. So basically, it helps us with mostly debugging, explaining code. So for example, I'm explaining on line number 17 that I'm concatenating two strings. Right? So comments are quite useful in that if someone else is to get your code, they can know what that line is doing. Now with multi-line comments, I don't know if JavaScript has a multi-line comment. I think it's mostly just double slashes through and through,
I think you
except
can
with
use
the
it.
string. Yes.
I think you can use the slash with the asterisk.
Okay, let me see. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So let me do it again. Slash with asterisk. Usually thought that is for another language.
C++, but it applies as well.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you for that. So multi-line comment in JavaScript, I guess it's that slash and an asterisk. I usually know it's for C++. Um, Now, my shortcuts, the reason why I can't keep track is on your screen. Now you're in VS Code. It actually applies in most code editors. If you use control, no, if depending on Windows, use control and then the forward slash, the one that is together with the question mark. If you do that, it will automatically comment for you, right? So that's what I've been using a lot. It's a very nice shortcut. So for example, I want to comment out these lines. So I'll highlight them as you can see, and then I press Control and forward slash. If you're using a Mac, it would be Command and forward slash, right? So that way it helps you just comment the code immediately, especially when you're debugging. So remember before I had that challenge of why my script tag wasn't loading, I was trying to comment the sections out quickly. So what I was just doing is select a line as long as the cursor is on a particular line and I do control forward slash, it will automatically comment. Or if I select a section of lines and do control and forward slash, it will comment the code. That way you're able to debug. You're able to go line by line to see where it's not working. Okay. So that is the first concept that I wanted you to understand. It is comments. Comments help us to explain code or debug code. So for example, if I have some error somewhere, like for example, line number 20, that variable has a typo, a y. It's supposed to be number 2. Okay. So if it doesn't work, I can go line by line to see what is wrong. So for example, I check that, I run my document, it's working. I uncomment the second line, that, and comment the third line. Then I notice this is where the error is. I fix it. Then I continue uncommenting. Okay, so that's how it can help us. The second concept that I want to talk about is syntax. JavaScript syntax. Now you'll notice on line number 15 and 16, at the end, okay, the end of the line is anywhere before the comment. Okay, so the first line number 15 ends at the quote. Same with number 16. Same with number 17. But line number 18 ends with a semicolon. Okay. Now, if I go to my browser, things are working. But on my code, I'm using different coding practices. Either I remove all the semicolons or put them there. Now let me get to hear from you. What does a semicolon do in code, in programming? What does a semicolon do?
Indicates the end of a statement.
It indicates the end of a statement. Thank you. So if I put that comma, that semicolon there, it means this is the end of this line. If I add another code, like let's x equals 10, this is legit. It works very well, okay? Because this signifies it's the end of this first statement, and then this is the end of the second statement. So it's good to use commas in this scenario. Use commas at the end of the statement, so that the interpreter will understand that this is the end. Okay. Now, it's not really a must, as you can see with JavaScript, because it understands that with every new line, it means that's the end of the statement. Okay. But for example, in line number 22, if I remove the comma, I get an error because it's still within the same line, but I'm doing some other statement. So if I don't close it, it will not know when to end. Right. So best practice in JavaScript is just a best practice, but in some other languages like PHP, you have to put a comma at the end of each line. So if you're planning to transition into backend, do this as a practice. Put commas at the end of your line so that it signifies the end of the statement, like that. Right. Now the last one is how to name your variables. How you're naming your variables. As you can see, my variables are separated with an underscore. That is what? Actually, let me hear. Who might know the different types of naming variables? We have two examples actually in our in our code. There are two ways of naming. There are several ways, but we have two most common ways of naming variables. Can you see if someone is chatting? No. Bravin, can I hear from you?
Sorry, I'm okay.
No, I'm asking a question.
Yes, yes.
I'm saying which are different ways of naming variables. Which one do you know?
Um, are we not top of mind?
All right, Faith.
Uh, I know the camel case way.
Okay,
There is
come
a
okay. Uh-huh.
yeah.
Another. Oh, okay. Nigel.
I'm only familiar with the camel case.
Okay, so if you look at my code, we have two types. The first one, of course, the if it's only one word, it's just the word itself. There's nothing much. But now, if it's two words, we can either separate using an underscore, or we can use this get element by ID, where we capitalize each um, the first letter of the next word. Okay, so for example, okay, so it will give us an error, but let me just work with me. Oh, actually didn't. Okay, so if you see this, so I have it in line number 18 and line number 20. Try and read it at a glance quickly. Line number 18. It's really hard to, you'll say get like you it will take you some time for you to understand exactly what is going on. But oh sorry. But if you read line number 22, the get element by ID has been capitalized in that each letter of the second of the word, the first letter of each word has been capitalized. So it's easier to understand that that is the end of each word, right? So that is a good coding practice. You can either separate by an underscore, the underscore will represent space, or you can capitalize the second, the first word of the second letter. Right. And with that, I'll close my class. I believe we have just ended when we started. Right. So 3 concepts and 3 best practices. The concepts were variables, operators, and data types. Okay. The coding practice: end each line with a semicolon. Naming variables should either be separated by an underscore or you capitalize, and use comments to either debug or explain whatever is happening in that code section. Okay. So I have 3 concepts and 3 coding practices. I hope you have understood them. They are at your fingertips, and it will lay some foundation for what we'll learn tomorrow and consequently in programming. All right, any question or comment or somewhere we need to touch on? Nigel, go ahead.
I wanted to ask, when on the naming variables thing,
Yeah.
like we're aware of camel case, does the underscore, but does the use of underscore have a name actually?
Yes. So actually I have like the full, let me get it.
Because I've been using it and I've never known that it has a name. It's a name, like
Right. So
okay.
here we have snake case. There's also Pascal case, but it's like it's like the other, but it's really not. It's like camel case, but it capitalized the first one. This is really common when you're naming the name of the file, the name of the file. So that's why you use Pascal. But there are others. I think there are about 5. Yeah. So we have snake case, underscore, camel case, capitalize this the first word, letter of the second word, or Pascal. Okay, so these are notes for another course as well, but today, okay, I promise I'll share with you this, especially together with the resources that I want you to learn about. So that is for DOM, and then variables, operators, and data types. I'll give you some sites where you can learn or practice how to work with those 3. And then tomorrow we will focus on we have functions, no, we have data structures, functions, and conditionals. Conditionals as well. Those are the 3 main concepts I want us to learn in the first half. Then the second half will now make our website contain some JavaScript functions. Okay, so that is for tomorrow. And in case, is there any other question before we close? No. All right. So we'll see you tomorrow. Okay. Thank you, Faith. Okay. Bye-bye.